Hi there, I'm Gloria Makarenko. Now, we have been spending so much more time at home through the pandemic, but we have still found ways to explore and expand our horizons. This is our Vancouver. Coming up, a theme show all about exploration with stories about the future of transportation and taking one's heart to the hills in BC's Backcountry. But first, how an epic family road trip through Europe was recreated by local filmmaker Ross Munro.
It almost seems like a dream when our family took that crazy improbable trip to Europe back in 1973. This was the plan. The trip commenced end of June 73. Duration, 6 weeks. Includes 9 countries, 1 VW camper van, 2 adults and 5 small children. Budget, $5 per day. And oh yeah, one more thing. Don't kill each other. That was our crazy trip when our parents took us on a journey connecting 3 generations of family. That was our European Tour 73.
Now, most families take vacations together, but most families don't pack up all 5 of their kids and take off exploring Europe all summer long. 6 weeks, 5 children in 1 camper van. Well, Vancouver filmmaker Ross Munro has waded through Super 8 footage and photographs to make a documentary about his family trip in 1973. Ross, hello there.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. So what do you remember, or what did you remember about that trip as you were growing up before you went through the footage?
Well, I just remember oddly enough, the older I got, the more I kind of started thinking about that trip, even though it was a long time ago in 1973. And I just remember at the time that I went on the trip, I was 9 years old. So I don't think at the time that I was going around in Europe on that trip, I don't think I really realized how crazy and unusual that whole trip was. I just kind of probably thought it was kind of normal. And another thing I really remember is that because I'm crazy about seeing movies when I was a kid, that I was really upset that for 6 weeks in the summer when I got released from school, I wasn't going to be able to see all those summer blockbuster movies, and that I was being forced to go to Europe on this, what I thought would be this very boring trip.
Poor you, poor you. Okay, so when did the idea start to transfer over all these old Super 8 films and actually make your own movie?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been a filmmaker, and I'd made a documentary film previous to that about old movie theaters. And then I thought, well, what would be the next idea? And I couldn't think of anything. And then I've always, for some reason, I've been the family archivist. I've been dragging around all that Super 8 footage all my life since 1973 almost. So and then I started looking at that footage again after all these years. And I thought, well, you know what, maybe there's kind of a film here. But then I just thought, and then because all the years that passed, I've kind of learned that there was a deeper meaning for my dad, why he decided to take us through Europe in 1973 on that very unusual, crazy trip. And so the meaning started to become more apparent to me, which I didn't really realize that in the past. So then I thought, okay, I think there's a deeper meaning and relevance to this trip. And I think with this Super 8 footage, now I can kind of explore that with this new context.
And what was the deeper meaning?
Well, I think what happened was I started finding out that, at the time, like I mentioned, when I was 9 on that trip, my dad was taking us to a lot of military monuments and things that sort of signified memories of when the Canadian military was there in World War II, leading up to even when my father took us to a concentration camp at the time, what was West Germany. And of course, as a 9-year-old at the time, I couldn't really figure out, why we were going to all these, seemingly unusual places that are not typical tourist destinations. And then that's why I think, and then later on, I realized he was trying to connect us, his kids, to the memories that he had growing up when his own father was fighting for the Canadian Allies in World War II in Europe. And so he wanted us, that trip was a way for us to kind of all connect together and retrace my grandfather's steps when he was fighting.
Okay, so how did you decide to not just make it a film though? Because you use some other art mediums as well in this short piece.
Right. Yeah. Like I wanted to, use the Super 8 footage that we actually took on the trip as sort of like the core, but I really wanted, like you said, I wanted to surround it, to really fill it out and give it and make it more cinematic and that's why we created original animation. We used some stock footage. We built up, the context of explaining to people what it was like in the 70s. And we just tried to use a lot of different kind of mixed media because we just wanted to create a more expansive cinematic look. We didn't want it to make it look like just a bunch of holiday Super 8 footage that was just kind of on a personal family level. We wanted to open everything up and make it more of a film and more universal for anybody to watch it.
Okay, it's universal, and yes, we can all relate on some level, although that sounds pretty extreme. 5 kids and parents in a small camper van. Did it feel a little cramped at times?
Yeah, like it's amazing what you think is normal at the time because it was crazy. Like you said, we had to live in there, eat in there, and the interesting thing is sometimes I think in 1973, I think Canada and Canadians had a really good reputation in Europe. So a lot of times because we had a Canadian sticker on our van, we would be parking somewhere overnight in a field or something. And we had a lot of people, whether it was Belgium, the Netherlands, France, that would knock on our door and offer us to come stay at their house. And so I think a lot of people still had those memories in the early 70s of when, Canada was part of the Allied forces and the liberation of Europe. And I think that there was a lot of positive feelings. So we did get a break from the camper from time to time to stay in someone's house. So that was a nice break.
Oh, I'll bet. Yes, I remember the Canadian flag on my backpack back in my backpacking and hitchhiking days across Europe as well. And it opened a lot of doors, that flag. I remember that well. Now, you talk about, the humor, the animation, some of the memories there. There is a point that your film gets a little serious, though. Is it, you do have sort of this realization. Can you tell us about that moment in your trip at Dachau?
Yeah, you're right about that. That's something that I always knew that I wanted to do that. I wanted to sort of start the film in a way where I could engage the audience and have everybody on board and kind of make it a little bit more whimsical at the beginning and kind of fun. And I always knew that tone change was going to come later in the film where, with the realization looking back as I narrate the film about the seriousness of my father's intentions on why he took us on that trip and how it was connected to his memories of my grandfather fighting in World War II Europe, I knew that, that was going to be the really tricky part of the film, was to get that tone change where it does get more serious. And then we go into a whole scenario and a whole series of scenes that go back in time and kind of reimagine what it was like for my grandfather to be fighting in Europe in World War II, as imagined through the eyes of my father, who was 12 years old, growing up at the time when my grandfather had to leave for Europe. So that was tricky, and so and luckily, I think talking to people that have seen the film, like I think we were able to sort of navigate that tone change where it got more serious, and I think that ultimately I think that gives the film a little bit more depth and a little bit more, out of the realm of just sort of a family souvenir of looking at a trip.
Okay, so ultimately, looking back on it now that you've completed your oeuvre, what did all of this experience and this trip down memory lane ultimately teach you about exploring, I guess, exploring our past and exploring other places too?
Well, I think, what it taught me was like, really looking at the film in its totality now that it's finished and just seeing how it goes back in time and how it really links different generations of my family and tells that story and sort of really connects everything. I think what it really shows me is that, when you explore and you either exploring the past or the present, it's amazing how everything is very interconnected. Like, and so like with this film, we have, it really kind of ties together how, like what my grandfather did in the 1940s fighting in World War II in Europe, and then how that affected my dad, and then looking back at how that affected us in terms of us going on that trip and kind of walking in those footsteps. It kind of showed me that, when you look back in the past and explore the past, it's amazing how it all ties together to the present, and how everything in the past somehow seems to connect to the present and even to the future.
This is our Vancouver.
All right, it's time for one of our favorite features. This is where we get to showcase a number of the photographs sent in by you, our audience. And so many of you take the opportunity to explore our region's beauty with your cameras. Nick Herger took in this sunset view from the North Vancouver shipyards. So lovely. Thank you so much, Nick. And Bikram Rijal was crossing the Pitt River Bridge, composed this image so well. We are right there with you, Bikram. And finally, Renata Perez was walking along the path around Deer Lake in Burnaby when she spotted this mallard in the water. Just lovely. Thanks so much for sharing, Renata. And do send us more. Get out there with your cameras and send your favorite photographs to us, bcphotos@cbc.ca. That's our email, bcphotos@cbc.ca. Now, for city dwellers, exploration happens when we use public transit. In this city, you can use a compass pass to cross through a dozen municipalities. But the pandemic has more people working more from home. So what will the future of transportation be like? Columnist Yute Lee looks into that.
You know what everyone needs right now? Another video about the pandemic. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit the planet, one of the first things everyone noticed was that people stopped moving. Nearly 5 million Canadians started working from home on top of the 2.8 million who were furloughed or laid off. Schools were closed, stores were closed, Denny's was closed. And the result? Empty roads, empty trains, empty buses, and a whole lot of uncertainty around what happens next. So let's start the story with something really exciting. Yeah, a graph. This graph shows the amount of people asking for driving directions through Apple Maps in Canada and how that's changed since January of this year. You see it drop rapidly in March as COVID cases first spiked in the country. Then, as the year went on, it gradually came back up before dropping back down again because we can't get our act together. But now compare that with public transit. In March, transit ridership across Canada dropped a whopping 83%, and the recovery since then has been much weaker. That makes sense. It can be really difficult to social distance on public transit, and frankly, it's way easier to keep your distance when you're surrounded by a steel box with windows. But all that has raised some concerns. We might be seeing a lot more traffic in the future. People that used transit before could switch to driving, adding more cars to the roads. And to top it off, more people appear to be moving from downtown areas into car-oriented suburbs. All that is a recipe for way more congestion. Many cities are already reporting traffic levels returning to normal, and in London, congestion levels are actually higher than they were last year. Now, there's another key factor to consider here. Remote work. A lot of people are working from home right now, so the amount of traffic that returns to our roads also really depends on the amount of people that return to physical offices after this pandemic. But I'm going to avoid opening up that whole can of worms because regardless of what happens to offices, there's still another issue here. Public transit is in trouble. With low ridership, virtually every public transit provider in Canada is struggling to stay afloat. But there is one transportation method I haven't brought up yet. Arms and legs. Or what normal people call active transportation. Bikes, walking, scooters, and other physical methods. The pandemic has made these options very popular. The reality is that active transportation projects can only go so far to address the full scope of transportation issues during this pandemic. And that makes me concerned about who we might be overlooking. Many of those lower income neighborhoods in Metro Vancouver are connected to a network of SkyTrain routes, our version of subways. And that is a big deal. A national study in the US found that commuting time was the single strongest factor in the odds of escaping poverty, more than crime rates and elementary school test scores. Fast and reliable transportation connects people to more opportunities and ultimately helps them move up in society. Changes in our transportation network don't just affect our mobility, they affect our social mobility. More congestion on the roads or a weaker public transit system will put up way more barriers for people who are trying to improve their lives. So, with that in mind, here are some other ideas. Many cities have used this pandemic to actually invest more in their public transit networks. Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, and Boston have introduced new bus lanes to ensure that transit gets priority on the streets as traffic returns. Then there are more controversial ideas. In Vancouver, the city is also considering a congestion charge, basically tolls for cars driving into the downtown core. And, I don't really have the answers for what will or won't work. These issues are complex, and I'm just a guy that makes videos for the internet. But working on this story has helped me recognize one thing. For many people, having access to a good form of transportation is a lifeline, and I think prioritizing that will help a lot of people move on from here.
Coming up, Johanna Wagstaff will be here to give you a few tips on how to create your own personalized forecast for your next adventure.
So let me get this straight. You want to create your own weather forecast. Be my guest. But seriously, I actually think it's incredibly smart for your own safety, as well as incredibly empowering to be able to analyze the day ahead. And it's pretty easy to do with a few simple steps. Okay, the kind of weather forecasting we're going to be doing is nowcasting. So that's using real live data to figure out what's happening in the next 12 to 24 hours. For your cousin's wedding 8 months from now, that's long-term weather forecasting. We're gonna need a whole other Science Smart for that. Step 1, look outside. Open the window, get outside for a second, and figure out what the weather's doing right now. Blue skies or just some high cirrus like today, not much is expected to happen in the next 12 to 24 hours. Mid-level cloud that's sort of bubbling up, looking like stripes or cotton candy, then the weather is changing. And it's overcast or rainy or snowy or you've got thunderstorms, then active weather is happening. Step 2, we're going to have to look at some weather charts now. But again, this is all live data. So we're going to look at the satellite to figure out where the clouds are right now. We're going to look at the radar to see what the precipitation is like and where it's moving. We're going to look at the winds, where they're going and how fast they are. And we're going to look at things like temperature, whether it's dropping or rising, pressure and dew point. All of this information is available through Environment Canada. There are so many different weather sites and sources, but the best place to start is Environment Canada. Speaking of Environment Canada, don't forget to check constantly through the day for updates on weather watches and warnings. And that is a matter of safety. If you're outside and you see lightning, get indoors immediately. Adverse weather can happen really quickly. Step 3, verify your forecast. Wake up the next morning and check to see how you did. That's how we all improve as weather forecasters, and I'll see you all on Twitter where we can really nerd out. And now, you're Science Smart. If you've got a science question on your mind, send me a tweet and I'll try to get it answered.
Johanna, thanks very much. Well, you are watching Our Vancouver. And since the pandemic, more people across the Lower Mainland certainly are exploring the outdoors. Guides and tourism operators are expecting to be overrun this coming season. And many first-timers are unfamiliar with the terrain and sometimes unprepared for a remote hike. Well, Sam Waddington owns Mount Waddington Outdoors in Chilliwack, and he's also an advisor to the search and rescue organization there. Sam, hello.
Hello.
So where are you right now?
I am at the home office. We tried to connect with you folks outdoors, but internet was not our friend out there, so indoors it is.
That's okay. That's okay. We'll make it work. That's the whole point of doing this for sure. Now, what did you see? I mean, after the pandemic hit, what did outfitters start seeing on the local mountains?
Yeah, well, you know what, this is all new, uncharted territory. So I think a lot of us thought that people would sort of stay close to home, and certainly that happened a little bit in the early spring. But it was the busiest summer on record out in the backcountry and on the trails this last summer, and the winter's been no change, and so it's been very, very busy out there. Lots of folks are getting outside and trying a outdoor lifestyle as gyms are closed and other avenues for being engaged and fit aren't possible. So it's, yeah, we've seen an absolute boom, and certain guides are incredibly busy and other ones are slow depending on the industry. But yeah, it's certainly been a wild year.
Okay, a wild year, a surge, a boom, all these things. Is that good news for the outdoors, or do you have some concerns about how things have developed this year?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, I'm always going to be an advocate of people getting outside under any circumstances and however that looks for people. And so pandemic, that's one of the things we can chalk up to being a success is people are experiencing the outdoors, but that comes with an impact. So we're seeing it harder and harder to maintain trails and to clean surfaces and to keep parks and recreation facilities open. Cities have struggled with that. The provincial government certainly struggling with that in lots of avenues. And all of that extra traffic at parking lots and that foot traffic out there has led to some increases in search and rescue calls for sure as inexperienced users get out there, and also just degradation on the trails. I mean, that many more feet out there with no additional maintenance has challenges.
Okay, and what are some of the, the scary scenarios that people who may not have been prepared that found themselves in?
Yeah, so I mean, those of us who've lived our lives in the outdoors certainly know, what to expect, which is always the unexpected, right? You have to go prepared for anything. It might be a sunny day, and in the summer, like last summer it was, and you have folks getting into the alpine and going hypothermic even in the middle of the summer, right? If it's cold enough in the alpine and those types of things. So we are seeing people leave the trailhead with no response plan. No one knew where they were going, and they were out of cell service. We saw people with inappropriate footwear and without proper food and water and the 10 essentials. And yeah, we certainly saw a lot of also irresponsible behavior on the trails as well. And that's kind of each to their own until you ask somebody else to come and rescue you. So folks taking undue risks in the backcountry as well.
Yeah, and then you have to go in and make sure they come out safely. So
Exactly,
for first timers or people saying, yeah, I've got to get my hiking shoes and my backpack ready, what kinds of things do people need out there? You talked about that top 10 list. What would be sort of top of the list?
Yeah, so that 10 essentials list, and it's great because you can just Google that, and every jurisdiction out there and lots of outdoor shops are going to have blogs about it, and you can read through different things. But those 10 essentials are covering those main priorities. So, some sort of a navigation and communication device. Lots of options out there, but don't rely on your cell phone because a lot of trails don't have cell service, so it's not going to be accurate for mapping and these types of things. But the big ones for me are the most essential ones for me are extra clothing, and that's dependent on the weather, but certainly a puffy jacket and a rain shell in our climate are almost always mandatory, even in the summer. Some sort of emergency shelter, and that's a space blanket or emergency blanket. You can pick it up in any outdoor outfitters, and a way to start a fire, a knife, sun protection. These are kind of on that list, but certainly just picture that scenario where you get injured on the trail. You're going to want a little bit of extra food that you didn't plan on eating. So a bar in the bottom of your pack that's not part of your lunch plan, a little bit of extra water or food of some kind or hydration of some kind. And then the ability to wrap up in an extra jacket or a warm blanket or something with you. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be sophisticated equipment, but it does have to be something. And so those are the key pieces that you can hunker down and wait out a rescue or somebody else coming to find you.
Now, just some of the basics. Thanks very much for taking us through some of those pointers. And again, underscoring,
absolutely.
you could find this online if you didn't get all of that down. Now, you talk about the wear and tear on the trails as well.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that the government should be doing to help keep those trails and keep people safer?
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like maybe I'm a broken record on this topic, but we have been advocating as a province. Health authorities, people have been saying get outside, get active, walk X number of steps a day, and all these types of things. And finally, people are listening, and we've been too slow to respond. So what I can say is that municipal and regional governments, for the most part, in the province of BC, have done an awesome job keeping parks open, keeping them safe to whatever extent they can. I know a lot of city recreation facilities and things are closed, but Rec Sites and Trails BC, which is a provincial ministry, and BC Parks have struggled. They are understaffed, both those ministries. at this juncture, in my opinion. Even just the last couple years of an increase in outdoor recreation has challenged them, for starters. And now the additional costs of wiping down facilities, wiping down door handles, keeping things open, keeping spacing, monitoring those really busy trailheads to try to keep groups dispersed. That's taxed them, let alone getting shovels in the ground and keeping our flora and fauna and these types of things safe. So I'd really like to see BC Parks and Flinro for Rec Sites and Trails BC step up. I'd love to see the province and the ministers take this really seriously, and instead of viewing it like a problem, view it as an amazing challenge to have. And this is an opportunity. If people go out this summer, and right now they're going out every day, we see it at every backcountry trailhead, and if they have an amazing experience because those assets are well maintained, this is going to grow BC's outdoor recreation sector. And not from a business perspective. I mean, I operate in that space and other people do, and it's a huge part of British Columbia's economy is recreation tourism. But the reality is it leads to healthier lifestyles. It leads to people being more active and more fit and loving where they live. And if a provincial government's not in the business of making this place better for all of us, then I think we need to re-examine what we're all doing here.
Hey, this is Grant Lawrence from CBC Music, here to share a really inspiring Canadian musical story of perseverance and triumph. Matthew Monius is from the remote Garden Hill First Nation of northeastern Manitoba, and 20 years ago, he was born blind. He's always been into music, and in recent years, rap, hip-hop, and trap has caught his imagination. He plays plenty of instruments, and he produces music under the name Matt Mac. His life changed when a traveling music studio and record company called Nui Ginan visited his community and showed Matt Mac that he could do this professionally. Check it out.
I know I gotta let you go. It hurt me just to say goodbye. Lately I've been feeling broke. I'm feeling all dead inside. Baby, I just wanna know, was your love all along? Questions started from my mind. I just wanna be alone. I know I got too close to you. I hate the fact that I fell in love with you. But it's alright, I'm numb inside. But then your love is like a melody that's stuck in my mind, yeah.
That is Just Wanna Feel Alive, written, recorded, and produced by Matt Mac in his bedroom in the Garden Hill First Nation of Manitoba. Now, to make his music, Matt Mac uses Logic Pro X, which is the same program that another bedroom artist uses, Grammy winner Billie Eilish. Matt Mac's music has led him all the way from northern Manitoba to sharing the stage with none other than superstar Nelly Furtado at Indigenous Day Live in Winnipeg a few years ago.
Don't give unless you slay. Disregard no drink. God in hell, let's shout and sing.
That is a song called Help You See, as performed by Nelly Furtado and Matt Mac, who has been blind since birth. He's a hip-hop producer, singer, and musician from the Garden Hill First Nation of Manitoba. Now, when I spoke to Matt Mac on the phone for this piece, he was in isolation, having just recovered from COVID-19. Unfortunately, his very remote reservation of just over 2,700 people, which is fly-in only, was suffering from an outbreak of the virus, and the whole community was in lockdown. But the coronavirus pandemic did not stop Matt Mac from releasing his debut album late last year, very aptly titled 2020.
Remember you my soul, the balance that I need. You challenge me in ways that help me to believe that you're my only hope. A place where I feel safe, a heart made of gold that I will never change. You're beautiful, I know that I will never waste this. Want you to know that I'm so happy that we waited. We have a love that everybody out here chasing. You are my world, so here's my whole heart for your never take it. So every day when I wake up, I can't believe my eyes. I feel alive, the deepest of my dreams are alive. I will take your lead, I just wanna take some time. Just take my time. When I'm with you, I'm in paradise, paradise. I swear my eyes are paralyzed, paralyzed. Cause with you, I'm in paradise, paradise. And trust me, that is rare to find, rare to find.
That is the amazing Matt Mack with Paradise. That's the lead single from his new album 2020, which was written, recorded, and produced by Matt Mack in Garden Hill, Manitoba. The video was shot in Winnipeg, which is where Matt Mack hopes to relocate in a post-COVID world. And 50% of the proceeds of Matt Mack's album goes to Winnipeg's Bear Clan Patrol, the Indigenous Volunteer Safety Program. Paradise by the inspiring Matt Mack is a song that you need to add to your Positive Vibes playlist for this week. I'm Grant Lawrence from the CBC Music Top 20. Stay safe, and I'll check in with you again next week.
Coming up, a beautiful animated short film about self-doubt and a parent's trust in their child's ability to explore the world on their own. Hi there, welcome back to Our Vancouver. I'm Gloria Makarenko. Now, mental health and the need to maintain it is a huge part of this pandemic. Anxiety and self-doubt can be paralyzing, especially if you're uncertain about the future. Well, the Affolter brothers own Vancouver-based Foreshadow Films, and they explore those themes in this animated short. It's called Try to Fly. It was made in conjunction with the Canadian Reflection series on CBC Gem and CBC's Creator Network. Coming up, we'll have more on the pressure search and rescue crews have been under since the pandemic hit, as more first-timers explore the backcountry. You are watching Our Vancouver. I'm Gloria Makarenko. Now, BC's wilderness has been busy since the pandemic hit, but that also means the province's search and rescue teams are fielding a record number of emergency calls, and COVID is making efforts even more complicated. Greg Rasmussen shows us the toll that pandemic is taking.
Preparing for the unknown. A young woman has been missing for 16 hours. About 50 rescue volunteers have set aside family and work to help in a desperate search in the mountains near West Vancouver. A nurse and 2 other rescuers ascend to be dropped into a remote location.
She told her boyfriend that she had lost her way at 3:30 yesterday. Rather than phoning, she did not phone 911. We're definitely concerned.
Off the east side of the ridge.
They just spotted her, so
yeah, I heard that. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
At the search headquarters, spotters in a helicopter radio in. They had just located 21-year-old Nikki Donnelly in a steep gully, but she's not moving.
They'll have to do an aerial extraction. She's in steep, inaccessible terrain where a helicopter can't land.
She posted video on social media from her solo hike, but then she ran into trouble, got lost, and her cell phone failed. By the time the crew reaches her, it's too late. She's dead.
I want to pull them away from this cliff.
In the past year, search and rescue crews in BC have responded to about 1,900 calls, a new record. A surge linked to more people spending more time in BC's backcountry. The busiest rescue team, which saw calls double in the past 12 months, is based in North Vancouver.
We attribute that to social media, to the amount of people that are on the trails and people wanting to kind of enjoy that experience on their own. But in doing so, they're getting into more technical terrain and they're losing that cell signal as well.
30 feet away. Roger.
In addition to many more calls, rescues are complicated by COVID precautions. For example, rescues like this one last year near Squamish show how people have to be in close proximity, sometimes for hours in small spaces, like helicopters. Missions often involve dozens of searchers and can take days or weeks. The all-volunteer crews now face additional COVID-related health worries. At any one time, multiple tasks can be underway in the province, such as this search earlier this month on Vancouver Island for a missing kayaker who might have ended up stranded on shore.
I'm on Trail Forks now.
Another location, another call-out. This time, a search for a man believed to be somewhere in the hills of a Vancouver suburb.
People are trying to find different locations to go to, and so what they're doing is finding trails that are unusual or less marked. The complication with that is that these trails have less infrastructure, there's less trail marking, and they're not that as well known in guidebooks or online reports on how to find and access them.
Every year, officials plead with people to take greater precautions, but many ignore that advice and continue to do things like ski out of bounds.
The snow was just so deep and I was so exhausted.
Just over a year ago, Mark Gajowski was lost in the snow for nearly 3 days in an out-of-bounds area near a ski hill. Since being rescued, he's become an advocate for being better prepared.
Best thing to do is stay in one spot because people are going to be looking for you. Have the proper gear for sure.
I've got hand warmers, just in case. I've got some Tylenol, mittens.
For some, that message is sinking in.
I take it seriously because I don't want to be one of these people stuck up here.
Such as these people out for a day hike.
Take 5 minutes to do some preparation and I think it'll be really worth it and maybe save your life.
But there are fears others haven't learned the lesson.
We anticipate things are going to ramp up even more, and that's really concerning for us because I think a lot of people are completely naive to the dangers.
For the would-be rescuers on Cypress Mountain, it's an emotional end to a tough day as they fly out with Nikki Donnelly's body. A reminder that this inviting landscape can quickly become unforgiving. Greg Rasmussen, CBC News, North Vancouver.
And that's all for Our Vancouver for this week. I hope you'll be able to join me weekday afternoons on CBC Radio 1 for On the Coast. Goodbye for now.